Hello and welcome once again to the Lebanon Public Library's virtual author visit. We do these presentations when we want to present an author and cannot put them in the actual physical space, and we want to get it out to as many people as we can. This will be not live, but viewed on Facebook or any of our social media channels. We have today local author Tom Calarco. He has written extensively on the Underground Railroad. Tom, welcome to the Lebanon Public Library.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to tell people about the Underground Railroad and why it is so important and why it should be always remembered in our history.
So, Tom, I know that so we have at the museum next door, there is an exhibit on the Underground Railroad. There's a lot of interest in the Underground Railroad. Um, you're from New York
Yes,
originally, right?
yes.
I know, so you've written a lot about the Underground Railroad. What is it about, first of all, what is it about the Underground Railroad that continues to fascinate in your opinion?
Well, the thing is, I think it's actually the interest has kind of shifted since I started. I think there was more enthusiasm back then because since that time there's been some debunking, I should say, of the Underground Railroad, and people or even mainstream historians don't have the correct idea about the Underground Railroad. Um, there's a classic view of the Underground Railroad by Wilbur Siebert, which is something I got interested in, just by accident. I mean, I'm a writer, not an historian, but I can explain it later. But I got into this by accident because I got received an assignment from my editor, said, "Oh, check this out," and it led one thing led to another, and now 30 years over 30 years later, I I'm still involved with the Underground Railroad. Sometimes I've been trying to get away from it because it's sort of like it's something like if you're OCD, which I'm a little, I would say, you can't get away from it. And then just one thing happens, a lot of serendipity in my life.
Yeah. What's by the way? So you we kind of talked to you from New York. What was the Underground Railroad like in New York? Was there any to speak of?
Yes, there was, but it was nothing like this area. I mean, people were crossing over from the Ohio. I mean, there were slave catchers and this and the abolitionists were always battling. But this even happened in the North. But in the North, it was much more obscure. Yet there were still hundreds of fugitive slaves who went through the northeastern New York because they were close to Canada, and people were trying to get to Canada. Well, so there was a lot of activity in New England and upstate New York. I mean, because there were very many avenues through which the Underground Railroad was used, I should say. I mean, look at the map behind me. I created that map, and it shows a lot of the different routes. And these weren't necessarily prescribed or, you know, um, predetermined routes. But people, this great network of the Underground Railroad was created through the development of the abolitionist societies, the publication of the anti-slavery newspapers, which were very well connected with the anti-slavery societies. So there's a great network that was created, although, it was, of course, it was illegal. So they had to do
Right.
it in stealth.
So you've prepared for our talk. You've prepared a little bit of a presentation. So we're gonna excuse me. So you're gonna turn on your screen sharing, and we're gonna take a look at this. I know that Zoom is not the greatest, but I think it's also, in a way, really good because we can do something like this very easily. So walk us through what we're looking at on each of these slides, please.
Okay, well, I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to be forward these. Just hit the arrow, I guess, because it's not. I guess it's in slide mode. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, well, here's that article I was telling you about. The editor said, "Oh, look, check this out. I didn't know anything about the Underground Railroad. I don't think the date's in here, but it's 1991
Okay,
when
so
this article was published."
this is the article that set you on your path.
Yes, exactly. And
Okay.
I had no intention of going any further than this article. But one thing led to another. Myself and the other writer, we co-authored it. She did one county, I did the other. she she and I didn't know each other, and they asked us to do a presentation at the local historical society, sort of like the Warren County Historical Society here. So I didn't know much about the Underground Railroad except what I had learned from the local historians in the area. So I did a little research, and so did Hope. We became friends. We did the presentation. And as I say, if you'll notice, I forgot to mention serendipity or coincidence, whatever. I started this in Warren County, New York. That's where the
Ah,
newspaper was, Warren County, and where I was living at the time, Warren County, New York. So it was we did it at this historical museum there, and it was the only time in all the 30 years I've been doing this that I had an audience of standing room only, because people were so fascinated with the Underground Railroad. Let me see if I can advance the screen here. Oh, I got to do it this, I guess. Well, this is the area, upstate New York. You can an old traditional view map of the Underground Railroad, and something I got into was creating maps. I did lots of maps, and
okay.
I'm kind of noted for doing maps. I mean, Siebert did those, and old people, people. The traditional, I mean, not traditional. The revisionist historians don't like the maps. They say, "Oh, that shows a predetermined route." No, it doesn't. It just shows where there were people who were willing and able to help and in these routes, and that's how I created my maps.
So let me stop you for a second. When people say it shows, when naysayers say it shows a predetermined route, and they're trying to debunk this idea that um, that there was a set route that everybody knew, because obviously if everybody knew it, then people would be caught.
That's true, very true, and you're correct on that. And the thing is, being caught in Ohio, I mean, just to make a contrast, it was much more, they had to be much more careful. And, in later years, a lot of people will say, oh, I have a hiding place in my old house, so it has to be a stop. No, not really. I mean, there were crawl space in the old houses. There's crawl spaces all over the place and little cubby holes. However,
Right.
if you were on the borderline between slavery and freedom, like where we are, you often needed a hiding place because the slave catchers were usually right on the tail of the fugitive slaves. It wasn't that way in upstate New York, although there were some. I mean, this is the Friends meeting. This was where I gained a lot of information from these local people because they kept the legend alive in their area. All right, this is the Wilbur House. This was attached to the Friends meeting. They were Quakers. They were very involved in my area. And they had documents from relatives, letters. This is another relic of the Underground Railroad in my area. There was originally a black sign with a hand, and somebody in the I think 1920s or 30s replaced it with this caricature here, and it was an actual route to the Underground Railroad, which
So talk a little bit. So what is this? What is that sign showing us? Is that sign
okay,
showing us a route?
4.5 miles before the end there was an Underground Railroad stop. Also, uh, it led to the area for the end of the Champlain Canal, which led to Lake Champlain, and there were steamboats on Lake Champlain that would take people to Canada.
Okay. Well,
So
this is
that was,
but this
yeah.
is obviously a sign after the fact, right? This would not.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Okay. Just just
1930s,
so just so it's out there and very
1930s.
clear.
Yeah,
Okay.
originally it was a black hand pointing though. That's all it was. Somebody did this as a caricature.
Now, so when you say there originally it was just a black hand pointing, that would have been in the in the 1800s, and that would have been a sort of a mysterious
Yeah.
clue.
Right.
Oh,
I don't have any direct evidence that it was actually from even the black hand pointing from the abolitionist period, but this is direct evidence. The next one. This is the
okay.
stone chair, 1841, and it had a map on there that suggested, that they go to Fort Anne and get the boat to Canada on Lake Champlain. And no one really knows who created this stone chair, but it was there from 1841. So, and it's only like not even a half a mile from the sign.
Is this Was this on somebody's property, or was it
No,
just
it's just
out?
alongside a public road.
Okay, interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool.
No, this, these are the things that intrigue me. And as I got more involved, I started writing little columns for one of the local newspapers about Underground Railroad. And then with the Friends Meeting House, the Quakers there, the local library participated in a study with me of the local Underground Railroad. They had a lot of information because this one family, the Wilbers, had kept all their letters and things. And so they had a lot of stuff, and we did the study together, and people came together, just like your library. And all the people from the locality came, shared their information, and we wrote up the grant. I wrote the grant, and the grant showed the findings we had from our study. So as I got along, I went to the American Antiquarian Society and found this broadside, and I didn't know what it was about. It sounded interesting. And what I found out was it was actually a vigilance committee where they were helping fugitive slaves. And it says they aided 287 in a 9-month period. And this was amazing. Not only that, it had the address of the vigilance committee office. And what I did, then I hooked up with these with this couple that was started the Underground Railroad study themselves. This was about 95 or something, 96,
Okay.
1990. And we got together and we learned that this was the actual house where this vigilance committee office was.
So this is the street address where that,
and now
that broadside
they made
was.
it into a museum now. They developed this organization, Underground Railroad Education Center in Albany. They have conferences every year and other events, and now this is a museum. But it all led up because of this broadside I found in 1995 that people had completely forgotten about. So,
Wow.
All right. You want me to keep going, or?
Yeah. Oh, please.
Okay. Well, now, as I got more involved in the Underground Railroad, I started going to the State Museum. I went to the State Museum. They had New York State Museum in Albany. They had lots of material. I found out in the catalog they had this paper, the Albany Patriot, and nobody seemed to know where it was, but they had two-year run of issues. And I thought, I got to see that. So I put in a request and said, it's in the warehouse someplace. We're going to have to look for it. So it took them 2 months and they found the paper. It was amazing. I go in there. Oh my God, 2 years. I'm rummaging through the paper. And I came across this little clip. And it was a lady saying, I want to publish the life of my late husband, Abel Brown. If anybody has letters, journals, anything that can tell me more about what he did and your interaction with him, please send it to me so I can use it for my book about him. So when I saw this, oh my God, who is this guy? I never heard of him. I called Syracuse University's foremost abolitionist historian and considered one of the top historians in the state on anti-slavery. And Milt Cernan, I said, Milt, who is this Abel Brown? And he goes, I never heard of him. Oh my God, he never heard of him. Well, I went and I found the book that she wrote in the library. It was on the shelf. There it was.
So she got it published.
1849, and this perspective was published in 1845. I looked on the antiquarian sites. It was selling for $6,000. This book. She probably only had a few hundred copies printed, right? So anyway, he also published the earlier version of that Albany Patriot that was called The Tocsin of Liberty, Elder Abel Brown. There it is.
Wow.
There were only a few, there's only isolated issues of this newspaper, by the way, around it. I haven't found many places where it is. And then I got the book, I read it through it, and I said, oh my God, it's got so much information about the Adirondack region. Because he went up there and lectured, and he collaborated with the people in the Adirondacks. So I wrote this article, Abel Brown, Forgotten Abolitionists. I got in one of the local, it was a monthly publication, arts publication, and it got a little notice. And they asked me to participate at the Conference of New York State History 1990, I think it was 1999, or maybe 98, because this was published in 98. So consequently, Abel Brown was known then, right? And then I started working on, I was going to do a book with the Washington County Historical Society.
Okay.
But then they said they supported me for one of the grants. So I got a grant. But then when we went to try to publish the book on Washington County, well, we can't give you a royalty. I said, well, I don't want a big royalty. I want at least something. And said, no, you got the grant. That's enough. So I withdrew my desire to publish with them and got a bigger publisher. But they said you need to expand it beyond Washington County and do the whole Adirondack region. And
Okay.
so I went. I this was one of the houses in Warren County, northern Warren County.
Still New York, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The
Just
Leggett
I
house.
want to, because there's that coincidence, I want to clarify for listeners, Warren County, New York versus Warren County, Ohio.
Well, and that's quite a coincidence, I think, myself.
Yeah.
Here I am. It's bookending my career in the Underground Railroad, in a sense.
Right.
Warren County and Warren County. This was a Leggett house. This was another one. By the way, Abel Brown in the book dined and stayed with Joseph Leggett. And here is Stephen Key Smith House. And this is a documented Underground Railroad site in Clinton County, which is kind of, yes, and Warren and Clinton County right next to each other here in Ohio, too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is in Franklin County, just up north, just on the border. This house I found out about. So, I mean, I did all this traveling. I mean, in New York first before I did it nationally, because I did it nationally too. Now, there were also some old maps. This one showed a military trail that went all the way from Chestertown, which was right near where the Leggett House was, all the way to the New York border and the St. Lawrence River. Well, I found out through local histories and stuff that there were two mountain men in the Adirondacks who lived right along this trail. And I actually found their sites. I don't have it I did an article for Adirondack Life about how I found these sites, but it was local people who showed me, who knew where they were and had heard about it for, eons, for all their life. It was a local legend. But, it was I tracked these people down to and found out who they likely were, and they had moved up here. Okay. Okay, so then I wrote a book, the first one, Underground Railroad Conductor.
And this is an expansion. This book is an expansion on the work that you did for that historical society, right?
Yeah, and it's sort of, because this is the prelude to the Underground Railroad in the Adirondack region. I'm not showing that one here, but that was published by McFarland and Company. Well, it was one of those. The reason this came about was McFarland lost my manuscript for somehow. I had to resubmit it, which they already had accepted it, so that the copy editor could go through the work again. And it put back production over 6 months. And I asked them, well, can I write a small volume that has information just to help people find the sites on the Underground Railroad? They said, sure, that's fine. They let me do it. So it's a small book, but the Adirondack Region book, Underground Railroad Adirondack Region, is the important one. Okay.
Gotcha.
And then the other thing, the serendipity, I found Abel Brown's gravesite, 300 miles from Albany.
Oh, wow.
That's the crazy story. That I tell that story. That's serendipity too, because I went to this Canandaigua Historical Society looking for copies of the Tocsin of Liberty, which they were supposed to have. When I went there, they said, "Oh, we don't have any copies. We can't find the copies, rather." I said, "Well, do you have a listing of cemeteries?" Because I knew Abel Brown died in Canandaigua. And they go, "Oh, yeah, we have it digitized." So they said, "Oh, there he is. There it is." They look at it on the computer screen. "Yep, it's in this cemetery." I said, "Well, where's the cemetery?" "Oh, it's down the block from here."
Nice. Nice.
Yes. So I walked through it, and it was hard to find it. But once I got in the right light, there it was, Abel Brown, and 34 years old. And then McFarland, who did this, agreed to publish Abel Brown Abolitionist, which I annotated and edited. I didn't edit the actual copy, but I annotated, and I did editing where I taught how I found the book and how I found his gravesite and things like that. I put extra maps in there that guide the reader. Things, and it's a book. It's a really good book. People should buy it, but not many people buy it. He's still pretty obscure. He's not,
Well, that's all right. I mean, that's one of the reasons we're here, is to tell people about some of these things. And I imagine if anybody's interested in the Underground Railroad or the abolitionist movement, this talk will be of some interest to them. So let them know about anything that's coming up.
Yeah, and you can go to my website. I've got 9 books on there. Undergroundrailroadconductor.com. One
Okay.
word.
All right.
Undergroundrailroadconductor.com.
So I don't want to interrupt your presentation,
Yeah.
but I think we're getting close to Ohio. Is that right?
Yeah, we're getting close to
Okay.
Ohio.
All right. That's
Yeah.
what I thought.
And also one of the persons that I really admired and I feel is the greatest historian of the Underground Railroad is Wilbur Siebert. The problem is he's been maligned and discredited.
Ah,
And
okay.
the irony, not irony, coincidentally, the person who's probably most responsible for this actually is from this area. And I don't want to malign, I know it's kind of maligning him. I did meet him once. Larry Garrett wrote an excellent book called The Liberty Line. It was like one of my most important books when I started to study the Underground Railroad. But as I became more and more involved in my study and learned more and more, I started to see a lot of mistakes in Larry Garrett's book. He had a lot of good things in it too. And actually, I met him in 2009 at the Network to Freedom conference where we were both on the featured panel. And my task, unfortunately, I already had submitted my paper, was debunking Liberty Line. Little did I know 2 weeks before the conference that he's going to be on the panel with me. So what I did was I did always admire the book. I had a lot of good qualities. And what I did was I showed the good points of that book along with the points that I criticized. So I think that was a good balance. And it wasn't, I felt a lot more comfortable doing that. I didn't want to insult the person, And he was so gracious. He passed away 2 years ago. By the way, well into his 90s. Larry Garrett. Now this is Wilbur Siebert, by the way. It's not Larry Garrett. This is Wilbur Siebert. And then, so that you can go to the Siebert collection. That you want to learn about the Underground Railroad. There's hundreds of letters and documents about the Underground Railroad that Wilbur Siebert collected. OhioMemory.org, the Wilbur Siebert Underground Railroad Connection. You can research it yourself. It's a great resource. So then I moved to Ohio because I got an assignment to do 2 encyclopedias on the Underground Railroad by ABC Clio, which I know the library has one of them places of the Underground Railroad. And coincidentally, I got an apartment right across from Anderson Ferry on Anderson Ferry Road, which was a site where fugitive slaves, legendary.
Wow.
Right across the river. Yes, believe that one. So then I started going on the bike trail. And as I go on the bike trail, I learned, there's a house, along the bike trail that was on the Underground Railroad. Now, I heard about it, but I didn't know much about it. And after I had been here a number of years, I was going by, and there's this commotion over in the house, and they're putting up a sign on the bike trail. And I go to them, what's going on? Oh, they're commemorating the house. And this is the butter. Oh, yeah, I know about that house. Well, they're doing a presentation right now. Why don't you? This is serendipitous. I said, yes. So I went up to it. And I
You are always right place, right time, it seems.
Yes. I made it with you, so that must be good. But anyway, so this eventually what led me to write the book, because I didn't do it right away. The Underground Railroad in the South Central, the search for the Underground Railroad in South Central Ohio, because I was doing other books before that. And it took me a while before I eventually got to do this, which it was published in 2018. So anyway, when I was doing it, this is incredible. At the Friends Museum in Waynesville has this replica of the Liberator. This was this could fit it could fit 8 people to sleep. So just imagine how big it was.
Okay, so this is obviously not, this is to scale, right?
Yes, it's a replica that was made. It was huge. And it was Abram Allen who lived over near the Oakland area. And here was his house, Abram Allen. They believe at least 2,000 fugitive slaves. This is over Oakland area, so it's north of here. And this is the only picture I could find of him. I think that I got it from the Friends Museum had this. And this is I went to his grave site. This was I think either his daughter or his wife, but his grave was no longer visible. His headstone. It was an old Quaker. No, it wasn't. He was Quaker. It was an old Quaker cemetery, but there's hardly anything there. Gotcha. I found that. And then this is Abram Brook. He was another one of the abolitionists. He wasn't a Quaker, but where this church is now, I forgot the name of it. It's one of the local Christian churches near on 73, off of 73, near 71 intersection. Okay. There was this huge barn. They called it the Shed, and they had abolition meetings. It was owned by Abram Brook, and they say thousands of people used to attend these meetings in this shed. That's wow. It was the area was very, very active and involved in the Underground Railroad.
So at that intersection, the view that you can see the stop sign and so forth, yeah, facing towards that field, that would be where that shed was.
I think so. That's what That's why I took that picture. Yes, because this is that church is right across the street. This is pulling out of the church. You see that big field.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So Abram Brook was someplace around there, but I don't know exactly. I could never find. I tried the church. I left them notes. I called them up, and it's like put it this way. I had a lot more help in New York because I was known in New York. I was a newspaper reporter there. I was a reviewer. I did columns. So people knew me right away. It's just like I walked in. But if I come here in Warren, who's Tom Calarco? Who is he? I don't, some old fart, it's like I should maybe interesting. Cut that out. But anyway, he's just some old guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's he's a raving maniac, just like Orson Murray, who I'm doing the book on now, by the way.
Okay. All right.
And you can find that book about Orson Murray. I've already written the first half of it about when he was in Vermont. It's on my website, undergroundrailroadconductor.com. Okay. Now, these are two of the most prolific, well, they're husband and wife, the Nicholsons, Jane and Valentine Nicholson. They probably helped in the realm of 2,000 fugitive slaves too. And they lived in Harveysburg. Harveysburg was really very, diverse, way ahead of its time. They had a school for Black children back then. Can you imagine? And it was an amazing place at the time. Like somebody was saying, oh, it's not that way anymore, but it's the politics have changed considerably. But anyway, it was a very progressive community. And there's the book, The Underground Railroad. And there's, it's a really good book. I kind of wish I got more promotion for it. I moved away for a while. I've been moving and moving. But then I moved back when it was requested to do this book on Orson Murray. And so here I am now. And I've been thinking about, I'd like to see if I get more interest in the local Underground Railroad, because there were stops. The Corwin family definitely was involved. There were probably others. And I went to the city council meeting, and I just, showed my interest and asked for people to get more interested and to contact me at undergroundrailroadconductor.com and share their information.
Is the back of that book, the photo on the back of that book, I can see there's the Liberator that you showed earlier. Yes. Now the bigger photo, is that the real life Liberator?
No. In fact, that's just a little it's an example of the false bottom wagons that many of the local farmers used to use to transport small numbers of fugitive slaves. Now, that wagon is in the Levi Coffin Museum in Fountain, Indiana. That's where I got that picture. Now, the Liberator was way bigger than that.
Okay.
The Liberator was huge. It was a big, huge covered wagon. So as you can see, and then you got Udney Hyde and Addison White, who was a fugitive slave. That's a great, unbelievable story. That I tell in that book that runs through the book. It's like a thread through the book.
Gotcha.
It's important. Now, here's the next step on our journey here today. Is I have a poem that I wrote, and I hope we can get the sharing and the music and everything together.
We'll see. Technology sometimes can be tricky on this.
I got to get the screen for the. I stop share, I guess, so I can get the music. Okay. Okay. I want to. I'll put this on the taskbar here, so I can get the music going. Where is it? The taskbar. How can I make this smaller? Oh, view. Oh, exit full screen. Oh, okay. Now I have it. Okay. Now I have to find the music, which is once I start the music too now. Once I start it, then the poem's going to start. And
All right.
then, and hopefully we can coordinate the music, the slides, and my voice together. We'll do our best. Here we go. 4-minute long poem, but it's a very heartfelt poem, and I hope people will enjoy it. The Legend of the Underground Railroad. All the tracks are gone. The abolitionists no longer. The slaveholders turned to dust. The freedom seekers vanished, but their legend lives on. Ripley's Rankins hit fugitives, battled slave catchers, raised a lantern atop a 30-foot pole overlooking the valley, a beacon of liberty, spreading hope where all else was darkness. Henry Brown mailed himself in a box, 3.5 feet by 2, from Richmond to Philadelphia. Turned upside down, his brains felt about to burst. Finally released after 27 hours. He broke out in song. He had waited patiently for the Lord, and his prayers had been answered. Harriet Jacobs fled to her grandmother's attic, 7 feet by 9, to escape her lascivious master. 7 long years waiting for freedom. Charles Torrey rescued 15 slaves, delivering them in a wagon, eluding slave patrols from D.C. to Troy, New York, 350 miles. Returning, he was caught, put in prison where he died, leaving a widow and 3 children. Seth Conklin planned the perfect escape for 4 slaves in Alabama. They rowed about 250 miles down the Tennessee River, another 75 along the Ohio, 44 more up the Wabash, only to be caught by slave catchers, putting Seth in chains, pushing him to his death in the Ohio, that borderline between slavery and freedom. William Still was the secretary in Philadelphia's abolition office when fate brought him his long-lost brother. Thereafter, he recorded stories of hundreds of others who sought his help and put them in a book that testifies to the legend. Louis Napoleon often got out of bed in the wee hours to meet freedom seekers at the ferry, brought them to a safe house in New York City until the office of Editor Gay was ready to receive and send them where they could be free. Harriet, the Moses of her people, stilled the cry of babies, outfoxed the slave catchers, foretold of successful excursions to the promised land, and helped Union soldiers free hundreds from slavery. John Brown took the name Shubal Morgan to rescue 19 slaves from Missouri to Kansas, through Iowa, Illinois, and Michigan, delivering them to the promised land, the longest journey ever on the legendary gateway. And being hung by the neck, his glory, hallelujah, was sung by the soldiers, fighting for the freedom we should sing of forever. That is their story, the legend we call the Underground Railroad, where goodness now seems lost to the ages. Whew.
All right.
Took me out of breath, man.
Thank you, Tom. That was excellent. Thank you for sharing. Uh, so to wrap up, so we've got you're in the area now. You're working on you're continuing your research into the Underground Railroad. You're looking at uh, the local history, the local spots and people who were involved. You've got some books available. We have a few of your books at the library, I believe. People can check it out. People can go to your website, see what's going on, or they can just accost you in the street. You'll be wandering around looking for hidey holes somewhere, I imagine.
Well, I don't know about the high heels because they're, they're few and far between. I mean, there were certain people, like I said, certain people did need them, like even like the Rankins. You saw the picture of the Rankins. I wanted that picture because I thought, well, if you can imagine a beacon, they had a 30-foot pole. They put a lantern. They actually did, and it
Yeah,
was went all, and they're way up on that hill. They're several hundred feet up. Besides, and so that how the Ohio Valley is, that lake could be seen for miles into Kentucky, for miles,
right.
and it was quite impressive. So,
I mean, I think
but the
it's
Rankins, they needed it. They they
yeah,
they had a hidden hiding spots underneath their barn.
and
They
it's
had
important to think about what night was like back
oh
then, right? I
wow,
mean, it,
exactly.
like it. I mean, it was dark, so having that beacon, I'm sure, was a metaphorical and literal uh,
Yes, for
light
sure.
at the end of the tunnel. Tom, thank you so much for taking part in this. Always fascinating. I think there's so much interest in local history, and I think we need people like yourself to continue to keep that local history alive and to keep digging, keep finding new little tidbits and new little bits and pieces that really flesh out these stories. Because behind these stories, there's
Right,
people
and
who are
and the thing
trying to do good.
here's the thing about it is that's why I said where goodness now seems lost to the ages, because it seems like we're in this period in our history where people aren't good anymore. It's just there's so much awful, just hatred and violence and conflict and hostility. It's just everywhere, and it seems like, well, here are people, you know, who showed, people we can admire, people we should use as role models to follow, not get away from this hatred and this, oh, it's awful what's going on now. So, that's why I think it's important for us to, you know, to keep this history in mind. It's a history where about people helping each other. And another thing that always bothered me was that we glorify, the wars, we glorify the heroes in battle. What about the people, like some of these people I talked about, Seth Conklin or Charles Torrey, people who they got nothing out of it and they ended up in prison dying for what they did. Or John Brown, he gave up his life basically. He gave up his life. I mean,
Right.
to me, he's the real hero of that whole of the abolitionists, the
Yeah.
greatest hero. There are a lot of heroes, but John Brown was number one.
Right, right. Well, again, thank you, Tom, for being a virtual author guest, and thank you, Lebanon Public Library patrons, and thank you, viewers and listeners, for tuning in. Keep your eyes on our social media pages and our website. Stop in to see us. Look for more, and thank you very much. Have a good day.